Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. The Friday afternoon air was thick with the promise of a weekend I desperately needed. My backpack straps dug into my shoulders. Each step on the cracked pavement a small, weary protest against the weight of a week filled with midterms and part-time shifts at the coffee shop. All I wanted was to get home, collapse onto my bed, and dissolve into the mindless comfort of a video game. My world had shrunk to that simple desire. I was cutting through a less crowded side street, my head down, music thrumming faintly through my earbuds, when it happened. It wasn't a dramatic collision, more of a clumsy, shuffling impact. I stumbled forward, catching my balance just before I could eat the sidewalk. "Oh, I am so sorry," a woman's voice said, flustered. I looked up. She was dressed in a peculiar, almost theatrical way, a long dark coat despite the mild weather, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed her face. In her hand, she clutched a small, ornate bottle, the kind you might see in an antique shop. During our brief, awkward dance, some of its contents had sloshed out, and a small clear droplet clung to the back of my hand. "It's fine. No worries," I mumbled, more focused on getting home than on pleasantries. She stared at the droplet on my skin, her eyes widening slightly in the shadow of her hat. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something urgent, but then she just nodded, pulled her coat tighter, and hurried away, vanishing around the corner before I could even get a proper look at her face. I glanced down at my hand. The liquid wasn't wet. It didn't feel hot or cold. It simply shimmered for a second, a tiny iridescent patch on my skin, and then it was gone. It absorbed so quickly. It was as if it had never been there at all. I shrugged, wiped my hand on my jeans out of habit, and continued my journey home, the strange encounter already fading from my mind. That was my first mistake. By the time I reached my front door, a wave of dizziness washed over me. The world tilted, the edges of my vision blurring into a soft, fuzzy vignette. I fumbled with my keys, my fingers feeling thick and uncoordinated. I managed to get the door open and stumbled inside, my backpack sliding off my shoulder and hitting the floor with a heavy thud. "Eric, is that you?" my mom called from the kitchen. I tried to answer, but my throat felt tight, and only a dry croak came out. The world was spinning faster now. The floral pattern on the entryway wallpaper seemed to swirl into a vortex. I leaned against the wall, my forehead cool against the plaster, and then everything went black. My next conscious thought was the sterile, antiseptic smell of a hospital. A rhythmic beeping pulsed in my ear, a steady counterpoint to the pounding in my head. I cracked my eyes open. The ceiling was a familiar landscape of acoustic tiles, the light above a soft, unforgiving fluorescent glare. My mom was sitting in a chair beside the bed, her face etched with worry. My dad stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "He's awake," she said, her voice thick with relief. She leaned forward, her hand cool on my forehead. "Oh, honey, you gave us such a scare. You just collapsed in the hallway." What happened?" I asked, my voice raspy. "The doctors aren't sure," my dad said, his tone low and serious. "They said it was probably dehydration, stress from your exams. They've run some tests, but everything looks normal." I sat up slowly, my body feeling strangely light. I looked down at my hand, the one the woman's liquid had touched. There was no mark, no rash, no sign of anything unusual. I must have imagined it, the stress, the exhaustion. It had all just caught up with me. They kept me overnight for observation. The next morning, a cheerful doctor came in, clipboard in hand, and told me I was free to go. Just take it easy for a few days. "Eric," he advised, "get some rest, stay hydrated." I nodded, eager to escape the suffocating sterility of the hospital. But as I was getting dressed, I noticed something odd. The place on my hand where the liquid had been, the skin felt different. I ran the fingers of my other hand over it. It was smoother, softer, almost like a baby's skin. I compared it to my other hand. The difference was subtle but undeniable. One side felt like the calloused hand of a teenage boy who worked with his hands and played guitar. The other felt delicate. I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me, a side effect of the fainting spell. Maybe, but on the car ride home, another strange sensation crept in. I could smell my mom's perfume from the front seat. a light floral scent she always wore, but underneath it, I could detect another, fainter fragrance. It was sweet, almost like vanilla and honey, and it seemed to be coming from me. I subtly lifted the collar of my shirt and sniffed. There it was, a soft, sweet scent that had never been a part of my natural body odor, which usually consisted of cheap deodorant and teenage angst. "You okay?" Sweetie Mom asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, fine," I said, letting the collar drop, just tired. But I wasn't just tired, I was confused. My body, the one I had lived in for 17 years, suddenly felt like a slightly unfamiliar piece of clothing. The fit was just a little bit off, the fabric softer than I remembered. It was a quiet, creeping wrongness that I couldn't explain, a feeling that settled deep in my gut and refused to leave. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just shaken up from the collapse. But as we pulled into our driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that the strange woman on the street hadn't just spilled a drop of liquid on me. She had left a part of herself behind. The weekend passed in a haze of forced rest and unsettling self-awareness. I tried to lose myself in video games, but I kept getting distracted by the subtle changes. The skin on my arms seemed less coarse. When I showered, my hair felt silkier, and that faint, sweet scent clung to me no matter how hard I scrubbed. I kept telling myself it was all in my head, a phantom sensation born from the shock of my collapse. By Sunday evening, I had almost convinced myself. I was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through my phone, while my mom moved around the living room, tidying up. My younger brother, Leo, was holed up in his room, the sounds of cartoon explosions bleeding through his door. It was a perfectly normal domestic scene. My mom paused in front of me, a laundry basket balanced on her hip. "Eric, could you at least put your own dishes in the dishwasher? You've been a lump on that couch all day." "In a minute," I grumbled, not looking up from my screen. She sighed, a familiar sound of maternal exasperation. She bent down to pick up a stray magazine from the coffee table, her arm brushing against mine as she did. And then the world dissolved. It wasn't like fainting. There was no dizziness, no blackness. It was a sensation of flowing, of melting. My consciousness, my very sense of self, seemed to pour out of my body and into hers. One moment, I was a teenage boy slouched on a couch. The next, I was standing, the weight of the laundry basket a solid, familiar pressure against a hip that was wider than my own. Her vision was slightly softer, the world viewed from a couple of inches higher. My thoughts were still my own, a frantic screaming monologue of what is happening. But they were happening inside my mother's head. I could feel her own thoughts, too, a gentle background hum of concern for me, a mental note to buy more fabric softener, a flicker of annoyance at my laziness. It was like two radio stations playing at once, one loud and panicked, the other calm and mundane. My panic reached a fever pitch. I tried to move, to speak, to scream. But my body wasn't my own. I was a passenger. I watched through her eyes as she carried the laundry basket to the hallway. I could feel the muscles in her legs working, the slight ache in her lower back, the smooth, cool fabric of her silk nightgown sliding against my skin. It was the most terrifying and intimate experience of my life. I felt the gentle sway of her breasts with each step, a soft, heavy weight I had never conceived of. The air I breathed in through her nose carried the scent of her own perfume. Now overwhelmingly close, I was inside her, looking out through her eyes, feeling the world through her senses. We walked into her bedroom and set the basket down. She stretched, and I felt the pull of muscles I didn't know existed. Then she turned and caught our reflection in the full-length mirror on the wardrobe door. And I screamed, a silent internal shriek that had no voice. Looking back at me was my mother, her face, her tired eyes, her shoulder-length brown hair. But the expression in those eyes was my own pure, undiluted horror. I tried to lift a hand, but her hand came up instead, touching her own cheek. My mind was commanding an action, and her body was obeying. Slowly, the background hum of her own thoughts faded, like a radio signal weakening. The driver's seat was suddenly empty, and my panicked thoughts were the only ones at the wheel. I was in control. Why is my body so soft? The words escaped my lips, but the voice was hers, a soft, feminine alto that was both deeply familiar and utterly alien coming from me. I brought my hands up, staring at them. They were her hands, slender with neatly filed nails and the wedding ring she'd worn for 20 years. I tentatively touched my chest. Over the silk of the nightgown, my fingers sank into the soft, yielding flesh of a breast. A wave of vertigo and profound shame washed over me. This was wrong. This was an invasion, a violation of the highest order. I stumbled back, her heels catching on the rug. The nightgown swished around my legs. The sensation of the fine fabric against my skin both sensuous and terrifying. I could feel the gentle rise and fall of her chest with every panicked breath I took. How do I get out? The thought was a desperate prayer. I closed my eyes, focusing on the memory of my own body, the feeling of my weight on the couch, the worn denim of my jeans. I pictured myself, Eric, separate from her. I imagined pulling away, like separating 2 drops of water. There was another dizzying, flowing sensation, and then I was back. I was on the couch, my heart hammering against my ribs. I gasped for air, my own lungs feeling tight and small. Across the room, my mom blinked, a frown creasing her brow. She looked down at the empty space where the laundry basket had been, then back at her room, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She shook her head slightly, as if clearing a fog. I must be more tired than I thought. She looked at me. Eric, are you all right? You're as white as a sheet. She didn't remember. She had no idea that for a full minute. Her son had been wearing her body like a suit. The realization was both a profound relief and a source of fresh horror. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots, the liquid, the weird changes, this fusion. It had to be the cause. That woman, that bottle. What had she done to me? For the next hour, I sat in stunned silence, replaying the experience in my head. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but a new feeling was beginning to sprout alongside it, a dangerous, terrifying curiosity. I had to know if I could do it again. I had to understand what was happening to me. My target was Leo. He was smaller, less intimidating. My door was open a crack, so I crept to his room and peeked inside. He was lying on his stomach on his bed, completely engrossed in a handheld game. He was 12, all gangly limbs and boundless energy. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. This is crazy, this is wrong, but I had to know. I walked in, trying to act casual. Hey, what are you playing? He didn't look up. Monster Clash. I sat on the edge of his bed, my knee brushing against his arm. I closed my eyes and focused. I pictured the flow, the merging. It happened again, the smooth liquid transition of self. One moment I was me, the next I was a 12-year-old boy, the plastic of the game console cool and familiar in my hands. Leo's own thoughts were a simple, focused loop, gotta beat this level, gotta get the power up. I could feel the boundless energy thrumming just beneath his skin, the flexibility in his smaller, lighter frame. His body felt like a well-oiled machine compared to my own slightly awkward teenage form. I made him put the game down. I stood up, feeling how much closer the ground was. I walked around his messy room, my steps lighter, nimbler. His jeans were loose, his t-shirt soft from 100 washes. It was less jarring than being in my mom's body, but no less strange. This was my little brother. I was wearing him. After a few seconds, I couldn't stand it anymore. The guilt was overwhelming. I focused, pulled myself back, and reappeared on the edge of his bed. Leo blinked, looking down at his hands as if he'd just woken up. "Whoa," he said, flexing his fingers. "I feel weird, like my body is super light and bendy all of a sudden." He shrugged, picked up his game, and was instantly lost in it again. He didn't remember either. I retreated to my room, my mind reeling. I had a power, a terrifying, impossible power. I could become anyone I touched, and as I stared at my own reflection in the mirror, a chilling thought slithered into my mind, coiling around my fear and curiosity. This power opened up a world of infinite possibilities, and I had no idea if that was a gift or a curse. For 2 days, I lived with the secret like a hot coal in my gut. I avoided touching my family, making excuses to keep my distance. At school, I navigated the crowded hallways like they were a minefield, terrified of an accidental brush of skin. The power felt less like a gift and more like a disease I was afraid of spreading. But the weight of it was too much to carry alone. I had to tell someone. I had to tell Sam and Mia. They were my anchors, the two people who had known me since kindergarten. Sam was the impulsive one, always looking for the next thrill. Mia was the opposite, level-headed, pragmatic, and the first to call us out on our stupid ideas. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was them. I cornered them after school on Wednesday, leading them to our usual spot, a secluded bench behind the bleachers. "Okay, what's up?" Sam asked, slinging his backpack onto the ground. "You've been acting weirder than usual." "He's right," Mia added, crossing her arms. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath. It's going to sound completely insane. And then I told them everything, the woman on the street, the strange liquid, fainting, the changes to my body, and finally, the fusion. I explained how I had merged with my mom, and then with Leo. I watched their faces as I spoke. Sam's initial smirk slowly faded, replaced by wide-eyed fascination. Mia's expression shifted from skepticism to deep concern, her brow furrowed. When I finished, silence hung in the air. Sam was the first to break it. "Dude," he breathed, a slow grin spreading across his face. "That is the coolest, most messed up thing I have ever heard. You can literally become other people." "Sam, be serious," Mia chided, her sharp gaze fixed on me. "Eric, this is a lot. Are you sure you weren't just dreaming, or maybe it was a side effect of whatever made you pass out?" "I knew you'd say that," I said, my voice tight with frustration. "It's not a dream, Mia. I can prove it. An idea, both brilliant and terrifying, formed in my mind. Come over to my house tonight. My dad's working late, and Leo has soccer practice. It'll just be me and my mom." That evening, they sat on the same couch I had been on, their expressions a mixture of nervous excitement and disbelief. I paced the floor, my heart thudding. "Okay, she's in her home office, paying bills. She's wearing her work clothes." "So what's the plan?" Sam whispered, leaning forward eagerly. "I'm going to merge with her, right here, in front of you," I said, the words feeling absurd as they left my mouth. I walked to the office doorway and leaned against the frame. "Hey, Mom, can I get you a cup of tea or something?" She looked up from her laptop, smiling tiredly. "Oh, that would be lovely. Sweetie, thank you." She stood up to stretch, and as she passed me in the narrow hallway, I made sure her arm brushed against mine. The familiar, dizzying flow. One moment, I was Eric. The next, I was standing in the hallway, looking at two stunned teenagers on my living room couch. The world was a few inches taller again. The scent of her Chanel No. 5 was a delicate cloud around me. And the clothes. God, the clothes. This was entirely different from the soft, loose nightgown. She was wearing a crisp, white silk blouse, a high-waisted black pencil skirt, and a pair of low black heels. The sensation was a complete shock to my system. The skirt was tight, restricting my stride to short, careful steps. It hugged her hips and thighs in a way that made me intensely aware of a shape that wasn't mine. The blouse was soft, but the tailored fit felt formal and confining. But the shoes were the worst. The slight elevation tilted my entire posture forward, putting pressure on the balls of my feet. It felt incredibly unstable, like I was constantly on the verge of tipping over. How did women walk in these things all day? Sam's jaw was on the floor. His face was slowly turning a deep shade of red. Mia just stared, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and scientific curiosity. I took a tentative step into the living room, the heels making a soft, authoritative clack on the hardwood floor. I tried to walk like my mom did, with a smooth, confident gait, but it came out as a clumsy, hesitant shuffle. "Eric," Mia breathed, her voice barely a whisper. I opened my mouth, and my mom's voice came out, though I tried to pitch it closer to my own. "It's me," I said. The sound of her voice saying my words was profoundly jarring. I lifted a hand, her hand, with its delicate silver watch and waved awkwardly. "See?" Sam finally found his voice, Holy crap, he stammered, unable to look away, his blush deepening. You're your mom, but you're in there. That is so weird. He was trying to look at my face, but his eyes kept darting down, flustered by the feminine form in front of him. Tell me about it, I said, the feminine voice laced with my own sarcasm. I took another wobbly step. The waistband of the skirt dug into my midsection, a constant reminder of the body I was inhabiting. The silk blouse felt impossibly smooth against skin that felt far more sensitive than my own. I could feel the delicate chain of a necklace against my collarbone. It was a total sensory overload. How do you get out? Mia asked, her voice sharp, pulling me back to the task at hand. I just concentrate on being me again. I closed my eyes, pictured myself, and willed the separation. The world flowed back, and I was standing in the hallway, back in my own body, my jeans and t-shirt feeling wonderfully familiar and blessedly loose. My mom blinked a few feet away, a confused look on her face. Was I just getting tea, she murmured to herself, then headed to the kitchen. I stumbled back to the couch and collapsed onto it, my adrenaline finally crashing. Sam and Mia stared at me, their skepticism completely obliterated. Okay, Mia said, her voice steady but her eyes still wide. I believe you. Sam was still processing. Dude, when you were her, you looked at me, and I knew it was you, but my brain was just short-circuiting. He shook his head, a wild grin on his face. This is insane. Can you do it to us? The question hung in the air. I looked at Mia. I expected her to shut it down immediately, to tell Sam he was being a reckless idiot, but she didn't. Instead, a flicker of that same dangerous curiosity I felt was visible in her eyes. What would happen? She asked quietly. I don't know, I admitted. I guess you'd merge both of you into one body. The idea was reckless. It was stupid. It was playing with a power I barely understood. Let's do it, Sam said, his voice buzzing with excitement. Let me try. I want to know what it feels like. Mia hesitated for a moment longer, then gave a sharp, decisive nod. Okay, but we need to set rules and be careful. My heart was pounding again. But this time it was a different rhythm, not just fear, but the thrill of shared discovery. My secret was no longer just a burden. It was an adventure, and I had just dragged my best friends into it with me. The rules Mia insisted on were simple. We only do it when we're all together. We never do it to strangers, and we stop immediately if anyone feels uncomfortable. It sounded sensible, but I knew, deep down, that a power like this was designed to break rules. Our first real experiment was born from Sam's complete lack of restraint. Okay, so if you merge us, he said, gesturing between himself and Mia. Who's in charge? We were in my basement, a space cluttered with old furniture and forgotten hobbies, giving us the privacy we needed. I looked between them. I have no idea. Let's find out. Mia shot me a look that said, this is a terrible idea. But she held out her hand. Sam eagerly grabbed it. I placed one of my hands on their clasped ones, took a deep breath, and pushed my consciousness outward. The sensation was chaotic. Instead of a smooth flow into one mind, it was like being caught in a psychic whirlpool. I felt myself connect with both of them, and for a terrifying second, 3 distinct consciousnesses mine, Sam's boisterous energy, and Mia's analytical calm swirled together in a single vessel, Mia's body. Then, things settled. I felt myself recede, becoming more of an observer, while Sam and Mia's minds seemed to jockey for position. Whoa, a voice said. It was Mia's voice, but the tone was pure Sam, loud and full of wonder. This is nuts, I'm short. Mia's body, now piloted by Sam, stumbled forward. He looked down at her hands, flexing the fingers. He patted her denim-clad hips, and, curvy, weird. Sam, get out of my head, I heard Mia's thoughts. Sharp and indignant, a clear voice in the shared mental space. I can't, it's like we're both in the driver's seat, Sam's voice in Mia's body replied aloud. He tried to walk, but his natural, lanky gait didn't translate well to Mia's more compact frame, resulting in a clumsy lurch. Stop it, you're going to make me trip, Mia thought, and I felt her wrest back a degree of control. Her body's movements became more fluid, more natural. This is so trippy, Sam said, his voice full of glee. I can feel what you're feeling. You're annoyed, and also a little bit fascinated. Shut up, Mia projected. but there was no real heat to it. I pulled back then, separating myself and leaving the two of them intertwined. The moment my connection broke, Sam and Mia stumbled apart, back in their own bodies, gasping. "Okay, that was intense," Mia said, rubbing her temples. "Having his voice in my head was the most obnoxious thing I've ever experienced." "It was awesome," Sam declared. "For a minute there, I had boobs. It was weird, but awesome." He turned to me, his eyes gleaming. "We have to try this on other people." That's when things started to get complicated. The power wasn't just a strange biological quirk anymore. It was a temptation. The first major incident involved my brother, Leo. It was an accident. I was trying to get past him in the kitchen, and my mom was right behind me, in the cramped space. We all bumped into each other. For a split second, I made skin contact with both of them at the same time. Chaos. I felt myself pulled in two directions at once, my consciousness stretching and snapping like a rubber band before settling, horrifyingly, into my mother. But it wasn't just me in here. Leo was here too. His bratty, 12-year-old mind was mixed with mine inside our mom's body. "Whoa, what's happening?" His mental voice was a high-pitched squeal of confusion and excitement. I was in the driver's seat, but he was a very loud, very annoying passenger. I had control of her body, but I could feel his childish impulses bubbling just beneath the surface. "We're Mom," he thought, the idea dawning on him with pure delight. "This is so cool." "Leo, be quiet," I said aloud, in my mom's voice, which only confused my dad, who was reading the paper at the kitchen table. "Honey, are you talking to yourself?" he asked. "He can hear us," Leo shrieked in our shared headspace. He tried to take control, and I felt a bizarre internal tug of war as my mom's arm twitched spastically. "Just thinking out loud," I managed to say, gritting my teeth. I needed to separate us. Now. "No way," Leo projected. "This is fun." And then came the thought that made my skin crawl. "Whoa, Mom's boobs are super soft. It's like carrying around two water balloons." My own internal monologue was a string of curses. I was trapped in my mother's body, listening to my little brother's pubescent commentary on it. It was a special kind of Freudian hell. "We are getting out of this right now," I commanded, both mentally and under my breath. I focused with all my might, picturing us separating, pushing his consciousness out of this space. "Fine, you're no fun," he grumbled. There was a jolt, and I was back in my own body. Leo was standing beside me, blinking rapidly. Mom was at the counter, shaking her head. "My mind is all over the place today," she murmured. Leo just looked at me and gave me a sly, knowing wink before scampering off. He remembered, and now he had blackmail material. The incident spooked me, but it only seemed to fuel Sam's curiosity. His new obsession was our next-door neighbor, a girl from our school named Chloe. She was friendly, pretty, and, in Sam's eyes, the epitome of perfection. Just for a minute, man, he begged me one afternoon as we saw her watering flowers in her front yard. "I just want to know what it's like to be her." It was a stupid, creepy, and invasive idea. "No way, Sam, that's crossing a line," I said. "It's not creepy if she never knows," he argued. "Think of it as research." Mia, surprisingly, didn't immediately shut him down. "It is a line," she said, her expression thoughtful. "But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious about the experience from a different perspective." And so, against my better judgment, I found myself complicit in their plan. Mia's idea was less invasive. She pointed to a woman walking down the street, a sharp-looking professional in a power suit, briefcase in hand. "Her," she said. "I want to know what it feels like to be that confident, that in control." We split up. I went with Mia. We accidentally bumped into the woman near a crosswalk for 60 seconds. Mia and I were merged inside this stranger. The experience was jarring. The woman's mind was a whirlwind of deadlines, stock prices, and a grocery list. But the feeling of her body, the clothes, it was a revelation. She wore a perfectly tailored gray blazer, a crisp shirt, and slacks that felt powerful. Her heels were higher than my mom's, but she moved with an effortless stability that I envied. For that 1 minute, Mia experienced the world through the eyes of a woman who commanded respect. And when we separated, her expression was one of awe. Sam's research was more visceral. We engineered a situation where I could get close to Chloe as she was getting the mail. I merged Sam and myself with her for no more than 30 seconds. The first thing that hit me was the scent of her shampoo like strawberries and coconut. Her body was smaller, lighter than anyone I'd been before. She was wearing a simple yellow sundress and flip-flops. The feeling was one of incredible freedom and vulnerability. The thin cotton fabric of the dress fluttered against her bare legs in the gentle breeze. Her skin was soft and smelled of sunscreen. I could feel the sun warm on her shoulders. Sam's thoughts were a chaotic jumble of pure, unadulterated joy. Her hair is so soft I can feel it on my neck. This is amazing. When I pulled us back, Sam was giddy, completely overwhelmed by the experience. Dude, I can't even describe it. Everything felt lighter, brighter. But I felt a growing unease. I was becoming an enabler, a voyeur. The initial fear of the power was being replaced by a troubling sense of fascination. I was getting used to it. The shock of feeling a female body from the inside. The sensation of a skirt against my legs or the weight of breasts. It was becoming less alien. It was still weird, still freighted with shame and confusion. But it was also compelling. I was spending more and more time thinking about the sensations, replaying them in my mind, the smooth glide of my mom's nightgown, the constricting power of the business suit, the carefree flutter of Chloe's sundress. My own male body was starting to feel plain, dull. The lines were blurring in my head. I was Eric, but I was also a collection of echoes from the women I had briefly become, and a dangerous, quiet part of me was starting to wonder what it would be like not just to visit, but to stay. The game we were playing was bound to have consequences. I knew it, Mia knew it, and even Sam, in his thrill-seeking haze, probably understood it on some level. We just didn't expect the consequences to be so immediate, or so terrifying. It happened on a busy Saturday afternoon downtown. The three of us were weaving through the crowds, ostensibly on our way to the comic book store. But really, we were scanning the area like predators. The power had become a secret obsession, a lens through which we now saw the world. Every person was a potential experience, a door to another life. "What about her?" Sam muttered, nodding towards a street performer dressed as a silver statue. "Absolutely not," Mia said firmly. "Think of the paint." That's when it happened. Mia, not paying attention, stumbled off the curb and bumped squarely into a woman walking past. It was a minor collision, but I saw Mia's hand press against the woman's arm for a split second. A tiny, almost unnoticeable flicker seemed to pass through Mia. Her eyes went wide, and she looked at me in panic. She hadn't merged, but I knew that flicker. It was the residue of the power, a lingering connection from our experiments. The woman she'd bumped into hadn't noticed, but another person had. A woman standing a few feet away, holding a shopping bag, was staring at Mia with a strange, intense focus. She had seen it. I don't know what she saw, a shimmer of light, a weird energy, but her expression wasn't one of casual observation. It was one of sharp, sudden recognition. Her eyes narrowed. Panic seized me. Cold. Absolute panic. We couldn't have witnesses. We couldn't have people asking questions. My mind, working on pure adrenaline, came up with a single, terrible solution. I had to get to that woman. I had to make her forget. Distract everyone. I hissed to Sam and Mia. I pushed through the throng of people, my heart hammering against my ribs. The woman was still staring, a frown on her face as if trying to place what she'd just seen. I reached her just as she started to turn her head, maybe to ask Mia what had happened. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding strained and high. "You dropped this." I pretended to pick something up from the ground. As she looked down in confusion, I reached out and grabbed her wrist. I pushed my power into her, intending to merge, to take control for a second, to walk her away and make her forget. But the moment the fusion began, I knew something was profoundly wrong. The merge wasn't a smooth flow. It was like hitting a wall. The woman's consciousness was strong, resilient, and for a terrifying moment, it felt like she was pushing back. But my panic gave me strength, and I forced the connection, pouring myself into her. And then I was in, and the world changed. The first sensation was weight, an incredible, deep, central heaviness that pulled her entire body downward. My center of gravity was completely different, located somewhere deep in my abdomen. My back ached with a dull, persistent throb. I was wearing a simple, stretchy maternity dress made of soft blue cotton, and it was stretched taut over a large, firm sphere that was her belly. The woman was pregnant, very pregnant. I stumbled, my mind reeling from the shock. I was looking out of her eyes, but my brain was struggling to process the flood of new and overwhelming physical data. Every movement was an effort. A simple step required a conscious shifting of my entire weight to accommodate the massive protrusion at my front. My breathing was shallow, my lungs felt compressed, unable to take a full, deep breath. What's happening? The woman's thoughts were a confused, frightened whisper in the back of my mind. Who are you? Just walk, I muttered, her voice a little breathless. I forced her legs to move, to turn away from the scene, away from Sam and Mia. I could feel her terror, her confusion. But my own panic was a tidal wave, drowning everything else out. I had to get us out of sight. I steered us down a side street, each step a monumental effort. The weight of the baby felt immense, a constant, living presence inside me. I could feel a dull pressure on my bladder. A network of faint, aching pains radiated from my lower back and hips. This body was a vessel, and it was working overtime. Then, I felt it. A tiny, distinct flutter, deep inside the taut globe of my belly. A gentle internal kick. The sensation was so alien, so intimate, it stopped me in my tracks. I leaned against a brick wall, my hand instinctively going to the swell of her stomach. The blue cotton of the dress was warm. Underneath, I could feel the firm, tight skin. And then, another movement, a slow rolling motion, as if the baby was shifting position. The woman's thoughts, her fear, faded into the background. My own panic receded, replaced by a profound, earth-shattering sense of awe and terror. This wasn't just a body, there was another life in here. A tiny heart was beating somewhere deep inside this form I had hijacked. I could almost imagine I heard it, a faint, rapid thump, thump, thump that was not my own. My power had always been a game of dress-up, a way to experience different clothes, different heights, different perspectives. It was a violation. Yes, but it had felt temporary, superficial. This was different. This was a violation on a biological, almost sacred level. I had intruded upon the most private and fundamental human experience. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the sensations, the heavy, aching pull of gravity, the shortness of breath, the phantom thumping of a second heart. But I couldn't. I was anchored to this body, to this life, in a way I had never been before. The power I had treated as a toy, a thrill, a secret adventure, was not a game. It was dangerous. It was a force that could irrevocably intertwine me with the lives of others, with processes I couldn't possibly comprehend. Standing there in a quiet alley, inside the body of a pregnant stranger, I finally understood the true weight of what I could do, and I was terrified. Separating from the woman was a wrenching, clumsy process. I pulled my consciousness back, leaving her blinking in the alley, a hand on her belly, a deep line of confusion etched on her face. She looked around, as if waking from a dream, and then slowly continued on her way. The memory of me, of Mia, of the strange flicker, wiped clean. I had covered our tracks, but the experience had left its own track, a deep, gouged-out line, straight through the center of my soul. I found Sam and Mia waiting anxiously back on the main street. They saw the look on my face and their questions died on their lips. "What happened?" Mia finally asked, her voice low. "She was pregnant," I said, the words feeling hollow and inadequate. I could feel it, the baby. Sam's usual smirk was gone, replaced by a pale, sober expression. The three of us walked home in a heavy, suffocating silence. The thrill was gone. The game was over. All that was left was the cold, hard reality of what we had done, of what I had become. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling. But I wasn't in my own body. I was back in hers. My phantom limbs ached with the memory of her pregnancy. I could feel the phantom weight in my belly, the remembered pressure on my lungs. I kept subconsciously arching my back, trying to alleviate an ache that wasn't there. I felt haunted. After hours of tossing and turning, I got up. I needed to see myself, to ground myself in my own reality. I went into my bathroom and flipped on the light, squinting against the sudden brightness. I stood in front of the mirror, shirtless, wearing only a pair of plaid pajama pants. I looked at my reflection. Eric, 17 years old, lanky, a little awkward, the body of a boy hovering on the edge of manhood. But that's not what I saw. When I looked into my own eyes, I saw echoes. I saw the tired, gentle eyes of my mother. I saw the sharp, analytical gaze of the businesswoman. I saw the bright, carefree innocence of Chloe, and most vividly, I saw the weary, overwhelmed, and profoundly maternal eyes of the pregnant woman from the alley. My own identity felt like a thin veneer stretched over a collage of other lives. "Who am I?" I whispered to the reflection, my voice cracking. The boy in the mirror just stared back, his face a mask of confusion and fear. I rested my hands on the cool porcelain of the sink, my head bowed. The physical sensations of that afternoon came rushing back with dizzying intensity, the tight stretched skin of her abdomen, the slow rolling movement from within, the weight, the sheer, overwhelming reality of carrying another life. It was terrifying, yes, but underneath the terror, there had been something else, a strange, powerful sense of connection, a feeling of purpose that was so primal, so fundamental, that it dwarfed everything else. For those few minutes, I had been a part of a miracle, an unwilling participant in the creation of life. A thought, insidious and terrifying, crept into my mind. I had been horrified by the experience, but was that all? Was there not also a part of me that had been moved by it, awed by it? Am I starting to like this? The question was a punch to the gut. Did I enjoy the feeling of being someone else, had the thrill of wearing a dress, of feeling a different body, of experiencing the world as a woman? Become something I was starting to crave, the power was a key, and it had unlocked doors in my mind I never knew existed, doors to empathy, to understanding, but also to a frighteningly fluid sense of self. I looked back at the mirror. My body, my familiar male form, suddenly felt like a costume, a role I was playing, and maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the only role I wanted to play. The idea that I might actually want to be in a woman's body, not just as a visitor, but as a resident, was a terrifying possibility that had been lurking in the shadows of my mind for weeks. The experience with the pregnant woman hadn't created it. It had just dragged it out into the harsh fluorescent light of my bathroom. I am Eric, but Eric was now a composite being, a person whose sense of self was irrevocably tied to the feel of a silk nightgown, the constraint of a pencil skirt, the flutter of a sundress, and the profound, life-altering weight of a child in the womb. I turned off the light and stumbled back to my bed, the darkness a welcome relief. I pulled the covers up to my chin, but there was no comfort to be found. My body felt alien. My mind was a chaotic landscape of borrowed memories and forbidden desires. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my old life was over, the boy who had walked home from school on a Friday afternoon, worrying only about midterms and video games, was gone forever. In his place was something new, a boy who held the lives and bodies of others within him. I closed my eyes, not knowing who I would be when I woke up. I fell into a restless sleep, adrift on a strange and uncertain sea, the echo of a second, tiny heartbeat, a faint and constant rhythm in the back of my mind. The transformation was no longer just a physical act I could trigger. It was happening inside me, a slow and steady psychological shift, and I had no idea how to stop it. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to.